Welcome to The Trader, a Traitors podcast. My name's Matthew, and I'm a writer, a reality competition TV fanatic, and a 100% faithful. Promise. The Trader is a deep dive into every episode of the backstabbing TV show that made you seek out this podcast, The Traitors, streaming on BBC and Peacock. This season of the podcast is dedicated to the UK series of The Traitors, and today, at long last, we've reached the final episode of the series, and what a finale it is. When I first watched this, I watched it as soon as it was available on BBC iPlayer because I couldn't bear the possibility of having the outcome spoiled for me by social media or anyone I knew texting me about it by accident. And it's this episode that cemented my obsession with the show. Watching episode 12 of the Traitors UK made me know there and then that this was pretty much perfect TV that would catch like wildfire. I have a returning brilliant co-host today to dissect this final episode, and we had a big meaty discussion about the show. So there's no TT news for this episode. Instead, let's get right to the deep dive with my special guest. My guest today on this special finale episode of The Trader is a returning co-host. This is David Bloomberg. David is a survivor and general reality TV expert, blogger, content creator and podcaster. He was the creator and publisher and editor of Reality News Online, Fox's on Idol, the Reality TV Hall of Fame and the Reality TV Hall of Shame websites, and also wrote weekly reality TV columns for 2 newspapers. Additionally, David is an engineer, poker player, Cubs fan, and occasional juggler. David, welcome back. How you doing?
Good. Thank you.
I made sure to include the extended bio this time.
Yes. I think I need to adjust that bio because it doesn't mention the weekly podcast too. I don't think so.
Yes,
I need to go back in there and fix all that.
I need to add in even more. So we've mostly spoken on the podcast about the US Traitors. Today we're talking about the finale. I had you on as a guest for the finale episode of the US Traitors, and I felt I had to invite you back as a guest for the finale of the UK Traitors because you're the perfect person to talk to about this. You've got a really good knowledge of how the show works, and we had a really great conversation last time, so thank you very much for joining me.
Oh, well, thank you.
I think we can dive right into our explanation of the game that we will be playing, that listeners of the podcast, regular listeners, will be pretty familiar with. We're going to play the Trader Traitor. I'll explain the rules for anyone who doesn't know. Our goal throughout the episode from here on in is to tell one lie to one another. The lie has to be a fabrication or a made-up fact, big or small. It can't be a fake opinion. At the end of the episode, we then each have to put our traitor hunting skills to the test and decide what we thought the other person's lie was. David, for the 3rd time, are you ready to lie to me?
I am. Although I don't think we did it the 2nd time, actually.
Oh, maybe we didn't. Okay, well...
Or that was your lie.
Or did we?
Or that was your lie right there. Okay. I see where you are.
Let's say that the game starts now, from this very moment. Lying aloud from here on in. And I think we are probably ready to dive right into the finale episode, episode 12 of The Traitors UK. Here we go. So the episode opens with voices of the series. We have these voiceovers from various people like Tom, booming over images of the Scottish Highlands, saying, "Alex isn't a traitor, she's my girlfriend." Some of those memorable moments from the series. Do you know, funnily enough, this really reminded me of one of the missions in the US series. They had a mission in an episode that wasn't in the UK version. Do you remember? It was this sort of like vanishing memory game. They were in a room, the lights would go out, the lights would come back on, and different things in the room had changed. And for some reason, they acted like it was the ghosts of the banished players who were stealing things, and their voices, like Cody's voice, would come over on some loudspeaker somewhere. So this put me in mind of that. We also get a little recap of the two traitors being banished so far, Amanda and Alyssa, and a montage of all the faces throughout the series, all the different contestants as they were murdered or banished. And then it's breakfast. It's time for our final breakfast of the series. Now, we only have 5 players left, so we get to spend a little bit longer in each player. Aaron reflects on his time, and he talks about the fact that he really was almost... It's quite surprising that Aaron's still here, because in an early episode, he really was almost gone, and he had that moment where he was really upset. He had to leave the round table, which no one else ever did. Somehow he survived, and what's quite sweet is he keeps telling us why he wants this money, and he wants to help his mum put a deposit down on a house. David, how do you feel about Aaron? Do you like Aaron?
Yeah, I like Aaron. I mean, I don't know that I like the extended breakfast intro. Like, there's, we're not waiting for anything here. You could just let all 5 of them come in. They don't have to come in one at a time and knock. There's no mystery in terms of who's coming or not.
Very true. Unless there's some sort of last minute twist to the game. It's funny actually. They keep talking about twists and turns in this episode. There's a moment where one of them says, I think it's Aaron, says no more twists and turns.
Yeah.
And I sort of thought, there haven't really been any twists and turns. I mean, the game's kind of played out the same format every episode, except maybe the dinner party episode. So I don't know what the twists have been. I guess they didn't know who would be murdered every morning, but other than that, I'm not sure.
Yeah.
Hannah then arrives. We get a montage of Hannah just sort of shouting and being loud, is what I've written down.
That's Hannah.
She says in her interview, it's quite dangerous to come in as a big personality. I often find that people on reality shows who are self-proclaimed big personalities are also possibly quite annoying personalities. I'm not saying Hannah's annoying. I'm not saying that. I just think probably the people who describe themselves that way may be a little tricky to be around all the time.
And also the ones who say when you meet me, you either love me or you hate me. Yep, yeah. Probably we're going to hate you.
I agree. Kieran arrives, and Kieran recaps the strangeness of his journey on the show, and it is kind of a very unique experience because he, of course, was asked to leave at the beginning of the very first episode. Him and Amos, off they went, only to return 4 or 5 episodes later, and Kieran says he's the only player who's played both roles, really. He was faithful for most of the competition, has become a traitor now at the last minute. You would think that might be an advantage. However, as we'll get to, maybe that's not the case for poor Kieran.
Yeah, Kieran is interesting in that he's the only one of the final 5 that I don't really like. On the show. Maybe in person he's fine, but he seemed cocky to me the whole time. Even his job description, solutions consultant. What does that even mean? That sounds totally made up. Later on, Hannah will say there's an edge to him and he looks guilty. And I mean, I think he looked that way coming into the house, or coming into the driveway before he was sent away, because he was trying to, in that, way back in that first episode, trying to be like, oh, I'm going to put myself over here, rather than I know I can beat all these people, but I'm going to put myself over here. Yeah, bye.
I found myself thinking the same thing when I looked at his job description. I did think, what is a solutions consultant? Could be anything. I'm not sure. Kieran, I think that's, I don't know, I think that's he's got this sort of cool, collected demeanour. I think Kieran's, I think he's a nice guy. I think he's okay. I don't mind.
Like I said, I can only judge him by what we saw on the show.
Yeah.
And he was definitely different than the other of the finalists.
Yes. which causes a problem as we go on.
Mm-hmm.
Meryl appears for breakfast. She can't believe she's got this far. I can't believe she's got this far.
Yeah.
She is loving all the connections she's made, the friendships. She says she's loved the missions. She's done all these really amazing things. Wilf arrives and he's got this really funny moment in his interview. He's talking to the camera and he says, yeah, I'm a traitor and stuff like that, but and it just made me laugh. A traitor and stuff like that. Like, what does that mean? But he's pretty proud of himself for getting this far and for making it through what must have been a really difficult process. I mean, I criticize Wilf quite a lot for looking guilty all the time and for squirming around, but I have to acknowledge that he's done it. He's reached the final.
Well, yeah.
He's got the extreme trust of most of the players who are left. So as guilty as I think he looks all the time on TV, he got away with it in person.
Yeah, and well, I have some thoughts about that. We'll get to that, I'm sure.
Yes. After breakfast, then, and of course there are no murders. They all know that they're going to show up today. We start to hear some discussions around the house, and immediately it's all quite awkward and uncomfortable, I think. Kieran is talking to Hannah and Wilf in one room at first, and he says to them, well, it's one of those two, meaning either Meryl or Aaron, who are in another room, and he says, I'm not voting for either of you, wanting them to say it back to them. I noticed that Kieran, throughout most of this episode, is wearing a trench coat. I think psychologically that's a bad idea. And even when they step outside, he's got these like shiny aviator shades on. I think you're kind of making yourself look a little bit surreptitious or a bit detective-y, or you're trying to be incognito. I don't know if that's a good look to go for.
Yeah, one of them said when he walked in to breakfast, you look like Inspector Gadget.
I can see the Inspector Gadget vibes. Maybe that would have helped him avoid his poor fate later. In his interview, he says that, Will and him, they're going to have to pull together as a team, although I think we can tell he already knows that may not be what's going to happen. Wilf's trying to talk through his plans. He suggests, this is in his interview, and he suggests, well, he's either going to have to get people to gang up on Meryl and get Meryl out, and then maybe move on to Aaron and get Aaron out. However, I noticed that this presents a problem, and I noticed this in the US version of the show too, and we probably talked about this. The Traitors do have a bit of a problem at the end of the game, although they definitely have an advantage throughout. There is this issue when you get to the final episode. The more faithfuls you vote out, the more you're putting the spotlight on yourself, because you just remain part of a smaller and smaller group remaining. Like, at some point, you can't keep voting out faithfuls for faithfuls to then just stand up and say, I'm a faithful. So, as a traitor, you kind of have to get to the point where you vote off one of your own right at the end in order to make yourself look like a faithful, and in order to trick the others into thinking all the traitors are gone. You can't just keep voting out faithfuls until the end. Although, I say that, and then in the US Traitors, which we'll talk more about later probably, that kind of did happen, and things that I didn't expect to happen happened. What do you think about the way that the game ends?
Yeah, it bounces around this episode. So I will therefore have to bounce around too. But Kieran said, well, I want to be a team with Wilf, and he shouldn't have brought me on just to stab me in the back. And I mean, first of all, it's not like he had a choice in bringing you on. It was a directive. Now, not Kieran in particular, but that he had to bring someone on. And so you've got that aspect of things, but you've also got the aspect of things that they can't make it together to the end. As much as Kieran keeps saying that, but there's no way those two were going to get together at the end or stay together at the end, because it seems like the Faithfuls had to find one more traitor before they'd end the game.
Yeah.
Meryl and Aaron both said specifically there was one more traitor in the game. And so I don't know if they were specifically told there was one more traitor. They presumed it. They acted like they knew there was one more traitor in the game. And so there was no opportunity for both Kieran and Wilf to make it to the end. It just could not happen.
Yeah.
And so Kieran was over here hoping Wilf wouldn't turn on him, and Wilf understood, I have to turn on him. I have no choice in the matter. And so, it set up a lot of what happens in this episode of Kieran being angry and then doing all the, it's snowballing from there. And so that is an interesting part of the end, because yeah, you had mentioned in discussing episode 10 that it seemed like the producers ensured there would always be a traitor. It was ensured there would always be a traitor at the end. And so it raises a couple of questions. One, how are the Faithfuls supposed to get out all the traitors? And two, how are the traitors supposed to act? Yeah, in either case, you almost need to play against production as well as against the game. Because, like you said, if you are a traitor, you need to let them knock out some traitors.
Yeah.
But then it seems like producers are just going to throw another traitor in there anyway. And so you've got that. But if you're a Faithful, maybe you don't want to vote out all the traitors. I mean, not that we have that problem of them, oh my gosh, being on such a great run. But maybe you don't want to, or they'll, production will just pick someone else anyway, and then you'll have no clue.
Yeah.
So, or, the other alternative is, if you're Faithful, make it known that you wish you had been a traitor so that you'll be the one picked as a replacement.
Yeah.
Because that's what, a number of these traitors have said when it came time for that was, oh, I don't want to pick that person. They're so anti-traitor. So you become the replacement, and maybe you're in a good spot. I mean, the other alternative is the producers should just start with 4 instead of 3, or they could just let the game play out and not mess with it.
Although, I suppose then what you end up with is the possibility, I think I said this on episode 10, that you could end up with, all the traitors gone by episode 9 or 10, and or in the last episodes, all Faithfuls, and it possibly reduces some of the sort of intensity or reduces the stakes for the viewers, and it might not feel so. You start the final episode thinking, oh well, the Faithfuls won, so I think they probably won't ever want that to happen.
Yeah, and again, there are 22 players in the UK version.
Yes,
and they still had the same number of traitors as the US version. I mean, it's only 2 more players than the US version, but still, throw another traitor in there to make it less likely. And, maybe if they really do find the absolute last traitor, just, have a, random spinning wheel, and you're the new traitor, rather than the way it was forced of Wilf, having to pick someone, picking Kieran, and then that setting up this whole weird endgame.
Yeah. I think Kieran probably was fighting a losing battle as soon as he was recruited. I think his only way out, realistically, would be to turn everyone against Will and get him out. And that was just never going to happen, because they were all so blinded by Will. I also think that the fact... I think Kieran was a bit of a disadvantage as a traitor, or a player in general, because he had been away for a little bit.
Yes.
Okay, it was only 4 episodes, but I get the impression he was still kind of seen as a newcomer. He hadn't made as many bonds with everybody, so if they were going to get rid of anyone, it was the guy who's not been here as long as everybody else, so I kind of felt like that was going against him too.
Yeah, I think so too. And the fact that there was the easy excuse that Claudia had said, well, they could be coming back in as traitors or faithfuls.
Yeah.
And I truly thought one was going to come in as a traitor and one as a faithful.
Yeah.
So I was surprised when they both came in as faithfuls.
Yeah.
But, I mean, they were looking for someone. They all trusted Wilf. And, you know, I mean, and like I said, and like Hannah said, you know, he just has a different personality than the rest of them. He has that edge to him, and he's easy to target in that way. Who knows? Maybe that's why Wilf actually picked him to begin with.
Yeah, perhaps. Well, before we even get to the voting out, we have a mission. Yeah. We have a mission to get through. It's the helicopter jumping in the lake, treasure hunt, speedboat, solve riddles mission all merged into one. The helicopter.
You're Scottish. Don't you have to call it a loch?
Oh, yes, the loch. Sorry, what did I call it?
Lake.
Oh. I was catering to my international audience. It is, of course, a loch. Loch glass. The helicopter flies the players to Claudia, who's conveniently waiting for them by the loch. She reminds them of the kind of missions they've done so far. They've faced barrels, bridges, lasers, even sheep. And she tells them there is £20,000 at stake here. And if they win that £20,000, it'll push the total prize over £100,000. She asks for the two volunteers who are the strongest swimmers. Aaron and Hannah volunteer before Claudia then reveals they will not just be swimming out into the middle of the loch, they'll be jumping from the helicopter. It's funny because Aaron told us in the previous episode on the rickety bridge that he doesn't really like heights, but he seems to have gotten over that. He doesn't seem too bothered about it this time around. And we saw this mission in the US show as well. Mm-hmm. The time for this mission will start after the second person jumps into the water. Their mission is basically a series of unconnected random activities. Jump into the water, get some numbers from the boys, as you may have noticed Claudia pronouncing it, rather than buoys.
Yes.
Which probably should be the way you say it. And then they use those numbers to unlock a padlock, and then they get in a boat and they follow clues around with a map, find money. It's all quite meaningless, but it's there's intense music ramping it up and making it feel all very exciting, and there's a time limit. Whether or not that time limit's real or not, who knows?
I find it funny that there's a time limit and they don't get to control the speed of the boat. Someone else can drive it.
Yeah, that's true. Claudia is really enjoying the walkie-talkie in this episode. She's saying over and out, things like that. And I noticed one really funny part of this, which is a complete reversal. Oh, I don't know if this is very specific. If you remember Andy and Quentin in the Traitors US, there's a moment where there's a clue or a money bag hanging on a sort of rope suspended above the trees, and they spend 5 minutes trying to find this really obvious bag. In a complete reversal of that, Kieran spots the money in a bag in a tree from the boat. They've not even landed, and he goes, there it is. So that just made me laugh and think back to poor Andy and Quentin desperately trying to find that same thing.
Now they had all 5 on the boat.
That's true.
Whereas in the U.S. version, they had 2, the swimmers stayed on shore and solved a special puzzle.
Yeah, that's right.
I do think it's interesting because one thing that we heard was in the U.S. version, the 3 on the boat had more time to talk to each other.
Yeah.
And make plans, whereas you didn't have that separation here. So I wonder if that was intentional, or it's just that because in this version they didn't have the opportunity to win bonus money, so there was no reason to keep people on the shore separate.
Yeah, who knows? But yeah, that's right. Ari and Kate in the US version were sort of on their own solving the easiest riddle known to man and taking 5 minutes to do it.
Yes, which also appeared in this one. They couldn't even come up with a new easy riddle.
Yes, that's true. They arrive at the pink house and they're solving this riddle. I notice Hannah says the answer to the riddle, glass, about 5 times before anyone listens to her. She even says glass, and Wilf goes, no, that's not it. And she just keeps going, glass, glass, glass. And eventually they realise, oh yes, glass, that is the answer. That is what you raise in a toast. Oh yes,
Right.
that is the name of the loch. So they manage to solve it. They win their £20,000, which means that the total prize fund for the entire show is £101,050. That took 3 takes for me to say that number properly. After the mission, we then move back to the Jeeps. Again, I pointed this out in a previous episode. The producers really like them to talk in Jeeps, don't they? They have cameras fitted. That's where they must tell them, talk now. You've done your mission. Talk. Scheme. Plot. So we see them in 2 different Jeeps discussing what they're going to do. Wilf is already planting seeds for Kieran's departure. He says to Hannah and Meryl, I was close to Aaron before, but now I feel really close to him. Essentially saying, I am not going to vote for Aaron. Who else might I vote for?
Yeah.
Wilf even acknowledges in his interview, we either have to banish everyone except the traitors, or a traitor has to be found before we end the game. And this is what we were just speaking about a few minutes ago. But I do quite like this first proposition. I hadn't actually thought of that. Is there a world where the traitors just banish all the faithfuls? This is possible, I think. It's very, very, very unlikely.
Mm-hmm.
But they could somehow do it. If there were 2 or 3 traitors left, could they convince people to vote for faithfuls at the last minute, turn on the final faith? Maybe
They could absolutely do. I mean, it happens in mafia games. In a mafia game, the regular citizens always far outnumber the mafia. But if you can get all of the good citizens to turn on each other, you can end up with 2 or 3 people from the mafia left.
Yeah.
Just literally controlling the vote. Now, in a mafia game, it ends at that point because, okay, you've won. I think we talked about that before. In a mafia game, you win as a team. So It doesn't matter if you're voted out or killed. Your whole team still wins. Here, I don't know. Maybe they start turning on one another at that point. Or they may be fine splitting. It's just, it is interesting. And I would think if you run the game enough times, you will end up with that result at some point.
Yeah. I think we spoke about the Australian traitors before. Am I right in thinking you haven't seen that, David?
I have not.
Okay. In the future, my mission is to move on to Traitors Australia. I have seen it, but I would like to do a podcast series on it. I'll give no spoilers. What happens towards the end of that series is very interesting in terms of logistics and numbers. I can't wait to get into it and discuss it. There is a moment at some point in the Traitors Australia when the traitors outnumber the faithfuls. It gets very, very interesting, and I'll say no more.
Yeah, I didn't want to start watching it till we were done here, so I wouldn't confuse anything. And then I'll start. Once I catch up with the various other shows that I've fallen behind on.
Yes. So it seems by the time we get to the end of the Jeep journey back to the house, Wilf has essentially come to the conclusion he is going to have to vote out Kieran tonight. And even at this point, I think Kieran knows that's very likely. He knows his name's going to come up at the round table, at least. So he knows he's going to have to defend himself. Back at the house, we have a funny little moment with Meryl plays Claudia. She's like doing this role play thing, asking them who they're going to vote for. Aaron can't even handle this. He just says, please stop it. You're making me anxious. From Meryl, the least intimidating person ever. Kieran and Wilf have a little bit of time on their own in the billiards room, which is very Cluedo, or Clue, as you would call it. Do you know that we call it Cluedo here?
You call it what?
We call it the board game Clue.
Oh, yes.
We call it Cluedo.
Cluedo?
Yeah, I don't know why, but it has the D-O on the end, Cluedo. Yeah. I just realised when I was saying that there, you might not know what I'm talking about. Yes.
No, I had no idea.
In Clue, do you have a billiards room?
I think so. It's been a while since I played.
Okay, so anyway, Kieran and Wilf are alone in the billiards room. Wilf
with the
tells Wilf tells Kieran very unconvincingly, I think, he's going to vote for Meryl, and that's their plan. We're going to have to turn on Meryl tonight. I don't even think Kieran believes that that's going to happen at this point.
I feel like everyone was horribly unconvincing.
Oh, yeah.
In all of these scenes. You know, I mean, like, Kieran knew what was going on. Wilf thought that he was convincing Kieran, went to get Hannah. As soon as he brought Hannah into the room with Kieran, it was clearly a bad idea. She is a terrible liar. She would have not been a good traitor. You know, and she used the oldest trick in the reality TV book. Oh, I don't know who I'm voting for. I'm going to decide at the last minute. When someone says that to you on any reality TV show, it means they're voting for you.
Definitely. Yeah, just lie, Hannah. Just throw out someone's name.
Yeah. You know, and I mean, Wilf wasn't doing a particularly good acting job. You could tell the end game stress was getting to him. And I think my notes are a little out of order, but I think this was when, or he had just said, you know, he wouldn't feel bad if he won $100,000 hand in poker, so he shouldn't here either.
Okay.
Now, if you win $100,000 hand in poker, you're playing at some pretty big stakes, or at the end of a tournament, one or the two. But he said it's hard when emotions take over. And I think that's where we are here. Now, since we last talked, I played in an online Traitors game that was set up by a friend of mine who usually runs the Mafia Zoom games. And I was one of the traitors. He does it randomly, but I was lucky enough. It was obviously just, you know, a few hours of fun, but one big thing you miss. And it's not just in this particular game, but I thought about it. I haven't played in many of the, like, Survivor online reality games or stuff like that, but a lot of people have. But in this case, what you miss is the aspect that we've seen in at least the 2 seasons I've watched, that you're taking money away from people that you have spent weeks befriending.
Yeah.
And I do feel like it's different than, like, Survivor, because Survivor, there's one winner. Big Brother, there's one winner. You know, Amazing Race, there's one team winning. It's not a feeling that you're taking something away from someone else. But when you are in the Traitors, if you are a traitor, these people think they're going to win with you, and instead you are literally taking it away from them.
Yeah.
Or at least it can be viewed that way. I think it's still something you need to be able to do in the real game, but it's not as easy as people think. I mean, I've been told that by Survivor players. You know, I've mentioned before, I have a set of rules for Survivor that players should use. You can see it behind me on a poster. Other people listening to this can't. But, you know, go to my various social media and you'll find it. And I've been told by players that who know the rules, they're like, yeah, I knew what I was supposed to do, but it's a lot more difficult to actually put it into action once they're playing. And part of that is because these human emotions come in. And, you know, that's just not something you're going to get in a short-term little few-hour game where you probably are already friends with the people and, you know, you're still going to be friends afterwards. And so it's just interesting to consider that I think that's what was happening to Wilf here, is that it was just the weight was bearing down on him completely.
Yeah. It's funny that you brought up what Wilf said about poker, because I've written down the same thing. Because I remember you used this as an example one time. We spoke before, and you said, well, you wouldn't feel bad about winning a game of poker, even though you bluffed your way through it. Yeah, and it is a bit different. But yeah, he says, Would I feel guilty if I won 100 grand in a game of poker? Maybe not, but yes, it's not exactly the same thing.
I mean, in that one, you're literally taking money from people, especially if it's not a tournament. You're literally removing it from one person and putting it into your pocket.
Yes.
One difference is if you're going, well, I guess it's not a difference. It's the same. If you're playing poker, you have signed up to play, and so you, in theory, you should never play in a poker game where you can't afford to lose the money.
Yes.
There was one famous poker player who was asked, what stakes do you like to play at? And he said, whatever stakes make my opponent uncomfortable. So, if he's playing against a regular person, then thousands of dollars. If he's playing against a rich person, millions of dollars. And so, because it adds that to it where you're not making the best moves for yourself because you're worried about the money. And in this game, I think everybody's worried about the money.
Yeah. So we're heading into the round table with this incredibly uncomfortable atmosphere. Like you said, no one is lying very convincingly right now to Kieran. He's going from room to room. People won't even look him in the eye. It's so awkward. Yeah. He tries to talk to Hannah at one point, and she just jumps up and says, "Oh, I need to go and do my nails," and just leaves him sitting there. He knows what's happening. She knows what's happening. We know what's happening. So we enter the round table then, and Hannah, she starts with a bit of small talk. Oh, isn't it great? We've come this far. We've made it, guys. And very swiftly turns to Kieran and just tells him, "You look really guilty," which he probably does because he is a traitor, a recent traitor, but a traitor. And I just thought at this point, yes, you're right, he does look guilty, but how can you say this to Kieran when Wilf, who always looks like he is having a nervous breakdown at these round tables, is sitting right beside you? I know we're biased as a viewer because we know he's a traitor, but still, there are so many shots of Wilf just looking sick. He's physically hides behind his arms and his hands. He curls up. So if anyone looks guilty, it's been Wilf for weeks and weeks and weeks. But
I mean, maybe they just got used to it and figure it's part of his personality, because he's been accused so many times.
That's true.
I will have something to say after what we're about to talk about a change in the way he's acting. But I do think they may have just seen him as looking that way all the time. And they may have noticed, they almost certainly noticed that Kieran had changed his demeanor because he knew what was happening and he was pissed off.
Yeah.
He was very unhappy about it. He was, as they called him, cryptic. He knew his ship was sunk.
Yeah, as soon as that accusation comes from Hannah, he knows it's too late. He has this really interesting response where he just says, "Well, I just hope that good people are left at the end." And even then, we realise he's dropping clues now. That's his first sort of hint that there's something they are not appreciating by saying, "I hope there are good people left at the end." Meryl starts rambling about being close to Hannah and Wilf. She's essentially just never got a clue what's actually going on.
No.
Kieran even says to them, "Look, just stop giving me excuses. I know you've all been talking about me today." He says, "Just put my name down. I'll stand up with immediate effect." And I notice here that he, for better or worse, he never actually lies. He never ever says, "I'm not a traitor, I'm a faithful." He sort of just talks around, probably because there's no point, but
right.
I think he probably decided he wasn't going to overtly ever lie. He would miss, he would not say certain things, but he was never going to say, "I don't vote for me, I'm not a traitor, it's not me." So he doesn't do any of that. And the vote then comes very quickly after that. And although you might think, "Oh, that's just editing, they've just not included very much." there's a shot of Meryl saying, "That was fast." So her saying that suggests, oh, it really was like this. There was no point in having any further discussions. It was
Right.
all very obvious.
Yeah, and I think Kieran even did. Kieran ask Claudia, "Can we just do this now?" or something like that, and it was just, why drag it out? Why drag out the pain? He knows what's going to happen. Let's get it over with.
Yeah. He drops another clue as well while he's still sitting at the table.
Mm-hmm.
Before they hold up their slates with the names, he looks at Hannah and nods towards Wilf. And at this point, I don't know if she knows what he's doing, but it's pretty clear to us what he's trying to do. So the voting begins. Kieran goes first. He votes for Will. He has this sort of standout moment of this series where he says a parting gift. And in fact, even one of the pieces of music on the soundtrack by Sam Watts is just titled Parting Gift. They've named it after. I wonder if Kieran got like a songwriting credit for that. Everyone else after him then votes Kieran, and we knew it was going to go that way. We cut to an interview with Wilf, and he looks really, really stressed out. His face is red, and he's saying, "I need to think of a reason to tell everybody else why Kieran would have said that." It was so obvious. He said it was a parting gift. How am I going to explain that away to the others?
Mm-hmm.
I think this interview must have been filmed immediately after the round table, simply because he's wearing the same clothes, but because he looks as if he's working through it in that moment. I know they do these interviews and they have to talk in present tense and they have to talk as if these things have just happened, but I got the impression that this interview really was present tense and that this was all still, that's the impression I got, that the round table ended, they hauled them in to do an interview, and he's desperately trying to figure out, how am I going to explain what Kieran just said in front of everybody?
I figured it was that, Kieran left, and then they kept talking it out, and then they did these interviews before going down to the fire.
Right, you're right, something like that, yeah.
Because he was just, he went into super defensive mode at this point. And I was actually talking on a completely different podcast about the whole idea, the accusation that someone doth protest too much, and therefore they must be guilty. But really, it's usually meaningless because, well, if you're accused of something, then obviously you're going to defend yourself, unless you're Kieran in this particular instant. But, usually, you're going to defend yourself. And again, it's something I see in these online games as well, in, these mafia games. I think I've mentioned it before, where you can be accused and then people can target you because you don't defend yourself well enough, or you defend yourself too much. And you've got to find this little middle ground. But in Wilf's case, he really did protest too much, or too poorly, whatever. Because, he was going on, "I'm 1,000,000% faithful. I would never lie. I swear on everything." He was just getting so worked up. And then finally he said the thing that clicked with Hannah, which was, "If you vote me out, I can't speak to you ever again."
Yeah.
And that was it. Hannah was like, "Oh, something is wrong here." She said, "If you have to give an ultimatum, there is no trust." And so, it was, he really, we could say Kieran did him in, but he very much helped do himself in.
Yeah, absolutely. I think the ultimatum is the thing that, and later on, Hannah will come back to that at a really important moment. But yeah, Wilf kind of has played such a great game and just loses it in his reactions at this last crucial moment. It's funny though that again, we're watching this as viewers from an outside perspective, and it's easy for us to say these things, but I'm still surprised it took Hannah this long after Kieran's, at the table, he's nodding towards Wilf very obviously. He has his parting gift comment. Even when he stands up, there's this just this brilliant TV moment of, I've called it the triangle of looks. So we have Hannah, Wilf, and Kieran just looking from one to the other. So Kieran is eyeing Wilf and then looking back to Hannah, essentially saying with his eyes, "It's him, it's him, it's him." Wilf is completely paranoid and is glancing between the two of them, half hiding behind his hands, like a little kid who's in trouble and he's been caught. And he's just thinking, is this, she figured it out? She figured it out? Does she know it's me? And Hannah seems to have understood. She knows there's something going on. She's looking between the two of them, thinking, why does Kieran keep looking at him? And as soon as, Kieran, he has no speech, he has no preamble, he just says, "I'm a traitor," walks out, and then all hell breaks loose. They're all so confused. I mean, Meryl's always confused. So Meryl's just clueless. She's going, we're right. Are we done? We're done, right? We got them. But at least Aaron and Hannah have picked up on the parting gift thing, and they're saying, why was he saying that? What does he mean? And then, like you said, Wilf just goes wild. He just has a complete meltdown because he's made it so far. He's on the verge of winning all this money. He's had to do so many horrible things to get here, and now maybe he's going to lose it. He just has a meltdown. I'm going to sort of take this moment then to have a discussion about a big question.
Mm-hmm.
David, was Kieran cheating? Did he cheat?
Well, it's really hard to determine if someone cheated when you don't know the rules. We don't know the rules.
True.
Now, as I saw it, because he was dropping hints, giving looks, making cryptic comments, my thought is, and I think we discussed this previously, but my thought is that they have rules somewhere, and it's part of the oath also that the traitors take, that you cannot reveal or you cannot, name that another person is a traitor.
Yeah.
So I believe that is the rule. You cannot flat out say that person is a traitor. So was he skirting the rule? Yes. Did he cheat? No. Was he vindictive? Yes. Was he angry? Probably. But I don't think he cheated. I think he just was like, well, fine, I'm not going to win. I don't want him to win either. I will drop these hints, and if they'd better pick up on it, and hopefully they do. Now, we know, and I don't think this is a spoiler because, quite frankly, until we saw the reunion episode, we didn't even know about it, but on the US show, there was someone dropping hints. And no one picked up on them at all, including, I think, any of the viewers, until he literally talked about it on the reunion show.
Yeah.
And we were all like, that was a hint? That was a really bad hint. But in this case, the hints were a lot more obvious. I'm trying to think of examples of where this would not, where this would be similar. And I, off the top of my head, it's really hard to think of any, but it's, I guess, there's a show on Netflix called Outlast.
Okay.
And it's made a big splash here in the U.S. recently. And it's basically, you're dumped off in Africa, in Alaska, much different climate. And the only rule is basically like you can't physically hurt each other.
Yeah.
Okay. Well, at one point, and I don't want to give too much away as a spoiler here, but at one point someone does something to another camp that does not physically hurt them, but could cause them to endanger themselves. Okay?
Yeah.
That's not against the rules. They did not actually hurt them. They did something that will make life much more difficult for them, but they didn't physically hurt them. They did not cheat. other people encouraged some of their fellow players to quit, because that's the only way you can win, is by everybody else quitting, is what you're told at is the other rule, I guess, and that's why it's called Outlast. But I would compare it to that. They're not physically harming these people, but they're putting them in a situation where they could come to harm.
Yeah.
And here, Kieran didn't outwardly say Wilf is a traitor, but he made it fairly clear.
Yeah. I haven't seen Outlast. I've heard about it on social media and Traitors fan pages and things, but it's not on Netflix UK for some reason, so I can't access it just yet. In terms of Kieran, I think I agree with you, and this is something that I go back and forth on. The first time I watched The Traitors and I got to the finale, I felt like Kieran had broken the rules, and I thought, that's not fair. I thought, that's not fair what he's done. That ruins the game. He's just given it away. That's too obvious. But watching it again and listening to what you said, well, we don't know what the rules are, so we can't really say he broke the rules when we don't know what they are, other than, like you said, you're not explicitly allowed to name a traitor. Can you nod in their direction and give cryptic clues like a parting gift? You can't write that into rules, really, can you? So maybe cheating isn't the right word. Maybe
Skirting.
he bent the skirting the rules, bending the rules.
Yeah, I mean, I spent 30 years writing rules. That was my job. I wrote environmental rules. And so, yeah, you take into account everything that you can think of that someone could try to do to get around it.
Yeah.
But still, what's in black and white is in black and white. And so if I say someone has to control their emissions 95%, and they control it 94.7%, but that rounds to 95, well, they're okay. And you may say, well, that's skirting the rules. Well, no, it's, I mean, they followed the letter of the law. And so if the rules say you can't name someone, well, he didn't. And I feel like he knew exactly what he was doing.
Yeah.
And that's why he said what he said.
And there's something quite ironic about it all, because I actually think this is a big part of why the show in the UK has been such an enormous hit. I think that's part of what made it such a great series, is the way that it came to this climax and what happened with Kieran right at the end. That's the moment that I saw everywhere on social media and memes and little clips. It's the Kieran with the parting gift and the nodding and the Welsh reaction, the triangle of look. That's what people have played over and over and over again. So maybe he was bending the rules a bit, but the producers actually, I think, are probably rubbing their hands going, this is amazing. This is brilliant. So maybe bending the rules actually worked for them, even if they didn't expect it.
So, yeah, going back to Wilf, I think that, honestly, even if he wasn't a traitor, even if for some reason, his story was true and Kieran was just mad at him, I think the other three had to vote him out, no matter what. You can't take the risk that you might be losing all the money.
Yeah.
And even if you're wrong, the consequences are that you end up with a higher percentage of the money.
True.
Oh, what a shame. Oh, no. I mean, I know they didn't want to vote out their friends, and that goes back to what I was talking about. That's a different aspect that you don't get, like I said, if you're playing a mini online game or something like that. That, you're hurting a friend by doing this. You're taking money. But in this case, if you think about it from a pure game perspective, you have no choice but to vote him out right now.
Yeah. And that sort of reminds me of something I've mentioned a couple of times. Throughout the podcast, I've spoken to various people, and often guests say they don't really like the missions. What's the point of the missions? A lot of people say they just skip past them. But the more I think about it, and especially with this final episode, we spoke about the fact that they were all on the speedboat together.
Right.
I do think part of the missions is to encourage them to have bonds and connections and feel like a team and feel like they're close, in order to make the betrayals more difficult and to create better TV. So I do think the missions serve a purpose psychologically. And yeah, if this was a game where they came to round tables, they had breakfast, and then they all went off to the rooms, it wouldn't, maybe it wouldn't feel the same. I don't know. I think the team aspects of completing missions must add something to the way that they feel about one another.
Yeah, I do think you're right about that. I think there is, there's always that sort of team bonding. When I have said, particularly about the U.S. version, that the missions were pretty much meaningless, it was just because, like, okay, it's team versus team, but it's not really a versus situation. They both
that
get
part
the money,
I would agree with. Yeah,
or especially in the U.S. version where you can win all the money back at the end.
Exactly.
You do it right. So in the UK version, I know it was shot right after the U.S. version. I do think they learned a few things. I think that they added to the team versus team aspect of things by making the way you win shields a little bit different.
Yeah.
And I do think that helped, because if you were on a winning team, basically that whole team had a shield, in the, latter part of the game. Because you didn't know who really had the shield. So I think that it was more meaningful in this version than it was in the US version.
Before the real finale, then, the sort of Fire of Truth, we have this segment where Claudia interviews the final contestants. I like this because it's quite sort of it creates this personable atmosphere. We feel like we're getting to know another aspect to the players. We care for them. It amps up the stakes because she asks them all, how proud are you got this far? What would you spend the money on? It just increases what's at jeopardy, really.
Mm-hmm.
So we arrive at the Fire of Truth. I've said this in every single episode pretty much about Wilf. Wilf looks, capital letters, awful. He is rubbing his face, and then his hands are in his pockets. He looks like he's been crying or about to cry. He's even... He looks like he can't look at the others. Everything about his body language is either screaming traitor or screaming, I have given up and I hate all of you now. So Claudia explains how this final game is going to work. They all have pouches to choose from. They can either choose to end the game or to banish again by throwing in a red or a green flame to the fire. I think we talked about this before. I don't really understand the point of the collection bag, because that gives the impression it's going to be an anonymous vote and you won't know who picked what colour. But they put their pouches in the bag. Claudia then pulls them out and says exactly who put in each thing, so it feels a bit silly.
Why not just have them throw it in the fire themselves?
Yeah,
I think
exactly.
that would be more, okay, go, Wilf, throw it in. Meryl, throw it in. Yeah. And, maybe they're afraid they'll miss, and Claudia's trained for this. I don't know,
That's exactly what I thought. Maybe there's some sort of intense fire training, and they're not allowed to throw the pouch. I don't know how much I could believe that. So we begin with Meryl. I don't know if it's just me. Maybe I'm reading too much into things now. I thought that the fact they started with Meryl suggested something was up, that it wasn't going to be a straightforward vote. That's only because my logical brain tells me we should just go from left to right and we should just start with Hannah, who's on the left. But we start halfway round the semicircle. I don't know. So Meryl votes, or Claudia throws the pouch in on her behalf. It's green. Wilf, it's green. And then we get to Hannah and it's the red flame. Mm-hmm. And she justifies it by saying, I don't know why Kieran said what he said. And then I was given an ultimatum, and if you have to give an ultimatum, then there's no trust. And it's like you said earlier, that was the thing for Hannah that made her realise he is not behaving in
Right.
in a way that suggests he's a faithful and that we can all trust one another. There's something she says it doesn't tie up with his personality and what she thought she knew of him. I mean, bearing in mind they've known each other for 12 days. Aaron also then votes, and it's a red flag. I was actually quite surprised that Aaron went red as well. I thought he'd be kind of like Meryl, but again, he does what you said. He says, I can't take a chance. I want this money to help out my mum. So maybe I'm wrong, but I'll be even more angry with myself if this money gets stolen from me. So I just have to do it. And at the round table, he did also pick up on, as soon as Kieran walked out, Aaron did immediately say, why did he say that? What did he mean? So I suppose he knew something wasn't right. Wilf is still defending himself. He gets so angry. He goes, that's how I feel. I feel you're taking the money away from me. Why are you doing this to me? But it's probably a bit futile at this point to defend yourself.
Oh yeah, and I think he knew it was futile when he got there, and I think Hannah was probably in Aaron's ear during the midpoint time, like when Wilf was giving that confessional.
Yeah.
I think that she was probably in his ear at that point too, and so I think she certainly helped the situation of getting him to vote red too.
Yeah. So the votes come in. Wilf begins. He votes for Aaron, even though he knows it's pointless now. The only way out of it, I thought, would be if Meryl then maybe also picked Aaron to vote for, and we ended up with a tie. That's really the only way I could see out for Wilf here. But Hannah votes for Wilf. Aaron votes for Wilf. Meryl votes for Wilf. He has been banished. It's this just brilliant moment. It's time for him to reveal his status. His head's down, and it's the first time I saw this. It actually is quite creepy. He changes his persona so swiftly. You'd think he was an actor. He looks up with a big grin on his face and says, "Guys, I'm a traitor." And this is a moment in the episode that I had such a different reaction to second time around. The first time I watched it, I felt really angry towards Will, and I thought I didn't believe anything he was saying. I thought he just is embarrassed, and so he's pretending that, oh, he's so happy for them. So that was how I felt the first time I watched it. I really didn't like him the way he behaves. But this time around, funnily enough, I actually got really emotional. I thought, oh no, I do believe him. Actually, seems like he's really happy for his friends. And he says, look, I was only able to get through because I had amazing people with me. It was so difficult. If it's going to go to anyone, I'm glad it's you guys. I mean, he was still willing to steal from them all up until the last minute.
Right.
But I do think he does care about them, and I do think he meant it. I'm really happy for you guys. I mean, what was your reaction to Wilf at the end?
Yeah, I think that it was, like I've been saying, the emotional burden just got to him. And as soon as that was lifted, the moment that was taken away, it was like you were carrying a physically heavy weight and someone took it from you. And you could just, oh my gosh, I'm so much lighter. Everything is better now. And so once that was done, he didn't have that on his conscience anymore. He was fine. He was happy. And, he had been stringing them along, or not stringing them up, bringing them along because they were the people he liked. And he really did control most of who went home and who didn't in that regard, which, that's maybe another piece of advice for future traders is don't bring your friends along. Like I understand you want to spend more time with them and you'd prefer they win than someone else if you don't win, but you want to win. So bring someone you hate so that it's a lot easier to lie to them at the end.
That's a good point. Yeah. So Claudia then asks them, you're going to have to vote again, even though we're pretty sure what's going to happen here. Yeah. It doesn't feel too intense anymore. They all vote green. They all reveal they're faithful. It's just this fantastic moment that they have the most triumphant music imaginable playing uh, playing through these scenes. I've just written, what a series. Even watching it the second time, I just thought this was just perfect TV. I loved it. Aaron is really sweet because at the end he says, "I can't wait to tell my mum," and and we end on this brilliantly, I think, sort of British note with with Meryl saying, "Guys, we've got 33 fucking grand," and Claudia just says, "Meryl, could you not swear for just 5 seconds? We're getting the end shot of the entire show," and even then Meryl goes, "Shit."
Yeah, yeah.
I just a brilliant moment of levity at the end of all of it, and Series 1 of the Traitors UK is over. So, David, we have made it to the end of the Traitors UK Series 1. What are your overall impressions of the series? How did you enjoy it?
I enjoyed it. It was a surprise to me at the end. I thought Wilf would win the whole way through. I thought Wilf would win, but then you had this like unforeseen poor play by Kieran to just give up. Less poor, but still bad play from Wilf at the very end after, doing pretty well through the rest of the season. And of course, combined with the vindictiveness of Kieran. So that just threw everything upside down. And so, like I said, Wilf just ended up essentially giving the money to 3 people he liked. Because he brought them along. I think it was a fine ending. I don't think that. I mean, it's funny because you mentioned how Meryl was consistently wrong, and yet there she was, still winning. So it reminds me of a show. It is a very, very old U.S. show. There was only one season for tragic reasons we won't go into, but it was called Murder in Small Town X, and they have to figure out who the murderer is the whole way through. And then at the very end, they have to decide based on the clues. There's 2 finalists left. They have to decide based on the clues who goes to one of the 2 spots and to figure it out. And both of them want to go to the same spot, but they can't because there can only be one winner. So through, whatever it was, bad luck, one ends up going to the one that he thought was not the killer. Well, it turned out that the clues were so convoluted that the one both of them were sure was not the killer was the killer. So he ended up winning by going to the one that he didn't want to go to.
Yeah.
And that reminds me of Meryl here. She ends up winning despite the fact she never would have voted Wilf out. She didn't even want to vote again, And but, because she's there with other people who were like, yes, we need to do this, she ends up sharing in the spoils.
Yeah. And I guess she was maybe brought along by Wilf, not just because he liked her, but because he thought, she's never going to vote for me, she trusts me. So, and then it didn't work out in his favour. What about favourite contestants? Who did you enjoy watching in this series?
Oh, Andrea. Obviously.
Yes, of course. Correct answer. Yes. 5 points. And we've talked about this a few times. Any changes you think should or could be made moving forward? Because there will be a second series of the UK Traitors.
I mean, I do think they need to, maybe clarify what can the Traitors say, what can they not say.
Yeah.
I mean, maybe they like keeping it vague for the audience so the audience doesn't know. But we talked earlier about how to handle the problem of not, or maybe not having enough traitors at the end. I don't like the way they forced a traitor conversion at the end.
Yeah.
I just did not like that. I mean, it was the illusion of choice. Okay, you can flip to be a traitor or you're murdered. Well, that's not a choice. That's okay. Of course, I'll become a traitor. Oh, and then I just get voted out. A couple times later. So I do think they need to alter that a little bit, because that was what set up the way the whole endgame played out. Now, maybe they're happy with it, but I was not. From a game perspective, I think they should have done things differently.
Yeah. Now, I thought I would ask you a little bit about some comparisons with the US version of the show. And at this point, listeners, we will give some spoilers here. We're probably going to talk about who wins the US Traitors. So if you haven't seen it and you want to see it, maybe you don't listen from this point in. So the US Traitors finishes a little bit differently. A traitor wins. Suri wins the series. And you said
I just like how you said, we might be talking about the winner, and then literally your next sentence is who the winner is.
I just went right into, I mean, I gave a spoiler alert.
Yeah, I know. I just thought it was funny.
Well, why not go right there?
Right.
You're a fan of Suri and her gameplay. You've said a couple of times today you were sure Wilf would win throughout the UK show. Why were you sure Wilf would win?
Well, part of it is that I do think the game is unbalanced towards the traitors. And I don't know, just the way he was doing his confessionals and everything else, the way people viewed him as a friend, I thought he would win. And, we didn't really even know about the Kieran factor until just a couple episodes before the end. So, that's hard to take into account. But I thought he'd vote out Kieran, and Kieran would, go quietly into the night, and that would be the end of it. But, I just didn't consider that Kieran would do what Kieran did.
Yeah.
And so I thought it would have an ending very similar. But, there are a couple of differences. Like I've said, these types of games weigh on you. Wilf is a complete newbie to that feeling.
Yeah.
Suri is the opposite of a newbie. She has played Survivor 4 times. She played Snake in the Grass. She has done these other things. She has been in the community for years and years and years. She knows these are games. She has been trying to win money for her family. And she knows that, if I have to break a few hearts, I have to break a few hearts. I need to do what has to be done. And Wilf this was his first time dealing with it. And it was, you could just see it. It was so difficult for him.
Yeah.
And at the end, I mean, as much as, it was a lot of it was Kieran that got him. A lot of it was, I think, Wilf's own guilt playing on him, that, he just couldn't keep it up. Whereas I think Suri in a similar situation would have found a way to keep it up. And in a way she did, because she got rid of Ari, and Ari was like, heck with it, I'm just leaving.
Yeah.
And of course he was the one who dropped the hint that I had mentioned earlier, that the hint that was so bad that no one caught it.
Yes. He said good luck instead of goodbye.
Yes. And so, I mean, a lot of, and we saw in the reunion, there were a lot of hurt feelings from a couple of the players, especially the newbie finalists. And those clips, I have used them on my video accounts, my TikTok, my YouTube. I mean, one of those reunion clips is literally the most viewed I have on YouTube.
Yeah.
Almost double as much as the next one, because people know Suri, and the comments that I've gotten both there and TikTok have been, and Instagram, have been like 99% in favor of Suri, and these other people just being bitter and everything else, because they've seen Suri play. They understand it's a game.
Yeah.
And Wilf just didn't have that. He thought he had it, and for a long time he had it, but at the end he couldn't bring it home.
Yeah. For future series of the UK show, How would you feel about the introduction of celebrity or reality TV veterans like they did in the US version?
Well, if they introduced those people in the UK, I wouldn't know who they were, so it wouldn't help me. um, but I thought that you had a news item that the second series was not going to have any.
No, yeah. The BBC and Studio Lambert have said that it'll be the same as the first series.
Okay.
Although, so yeah, they'll do sort of ordinary people, not celebrities.
Mm-hmm.
But there is still talk about doing a celebrity spin-off, probably a shortened version,
Right.
kind of like Celebrity Apprentice type thing. So they may well, I can see that happening, a celebrity version, but I definitely, but the next main series will be people who are not celebrities, and I don't ever imagine them doing a mixture of the two, which I still don't quite understand.
Yeah, I mean, we talked about that in the in I don't remember if it was the finale podcast for the U.S. or for the reunion podcast, but yeah, I mean, there are problems with doing a mixture, which is that people flock to the celebrities, whereas if you do a whole celebrity season, well, then you don't have that situation.
Yeah,
and so yeah, the mixture is. Yeah, it's definitely interesting, and there was we saw the same thing this season and other seasons too, occasionally on Survivor. This season on Australian Survivor, I won't spoil the outcome; it just ended, but it was another mixture season, and at the beginning, it really seemed to me like all the returning players were sticking together.
Yeah.
And so you have that issue, and you have the new players being like, oh, I've seen you on my TV, I want to play with you, and then the returning players have more control that way. It doesn't guarantee a certain outcome, but it certainly makes it more likely, in my opinion.
Yeah. A final couple of questions about the series. Favorite mission? I
actually the ones that were different from the U.S. ones I liked. I think the sheep I found very amusing.
Yes, yeah. I can't imagine Kate Chastain describing the faces of sheep.
Yes, and that was the thing too. Of all the things you could do with it, describing their faces. It's like, who came up with that?
And finally. Thoughts on Claudia Winkleman as a whole? Did you know who Claudia was before this?
No clue.
No. Okay.
No.
And in the UK, she presents our version of Dancing with the Stars. So our version of that. She's one of the hosts, and various other things, but that's sort of probably the biggest thing she's known for. Did you like Claudia as a host?
I did. I like Alan Moore. Okay. Which you can't argue with, being Scottish. I felt like, I don't know. I liked Alan, playing it up as, I mean, he described himself as almost a Bond villain, which maybe I didn't quite see it that much. But like from him, when he would pull down a picture and just throw it on the floor, it was more believable. I think Claudia did that once, and then she was nice every time after that.
Yeah.
And that was the thing. She was nice. She was almost a little too involved. Like she was rooting them on. She was hugging them. And I can see that like from a Dancing with the Stars host. In this case, it was, I don't know. There's nothing wrong with it. I just, I like the way Alan handled it better.
Now, before we conclude our game that we've been playing throughout, David, tell us, where can we find you online? What should we be checking out?
So I'm on Twitter at David Bloomberg, just DavidBloomberg, just my name. And then I am at the various video sites, like I mentioned, YouTube, TikTok, and Instagram at David Bloomberg TV, all one word. And that's the same account name on all three of those. And I do a bunch of different reality TV short videos there. Usually it's clips from shows with thoughts involved. Sometimes I do miniature versions of my podcast, like I did for all of Australian Survivor, talking about why each player lost or eventually won. Of course, I have the regular podcast for US Survivor, which is just called Why Blank Lost, and that's on the Rob Has a Podcast network. So you can find that, I'm sure, by searching your podcaster is that the right word? Podcaster of choice, podcast service of choice. That's what I was trying to say. So you can find me there. I will almost certainly go ahead and continue into Big Brother, U.S. Big Brother.
Okay.
But we've still got a long way to go in U.S. Survivor first.
Okay, fantastic. And as always, I will share all of those links. Now, David, we have been playing the Traitor.
Ooh. Ah.
I have told you a lie during our conversation. Did you deceive me? Did you tell me a lie?
I did. Well, I told you a lie. I don't know if I deceived you. You'll have to tell me that.
Sure. I should have said, did you attempt to deceive me?
Yes.
I'm going to guess your lie. I think you dropped it in very, very early on. If this wasn't a lie, then I am not a very good host of a podcast about the Traitors, because if this is true, then it's something I really missed. I think you told a lie about something that happened in the episode. You said that someone described Kieran as looking like Inspector Gadget, and I didn't catch anyone saying that in the show. Is that the lie?
No, I swear I thought that like Hannah said that. I swear. Now, I mean, it's possible I'm mistaken, but I believe that they said that.
I was so convinced. As soon as he said it, I thought, that's a lie. No one said that. But yeah, maybe I was too busy taking notes. Okay, you're going to have to reveal what was your real lie.
Oh, it was very intricate. I didn't play in any online Traitors game. That whole story was made up. The whole thing.
When you started telling that, I thought maybe this is a lie, but it went on so long. I thought, no, this is a real. He's talking a lot about this. I thought this is real, and I was even thinking, wow, that's really interesting. He's not told me anything about that. You failed me by doing the opposite of what I thought you would do. You gave me this huge story.
Yes.
I suppose that.
Everything that I said in terms of playing online games, and the difference in playing a long-term game, and all of that is true. It's just that I didn't play in any online Traitors game.
It never happened. Okay, now I'm going to be really annoyed if you guess my lie. What do you think I lied about?
I mean, I'm in a very similar situation to you, because either you told a lie or I just totally don't remember this challenge where things in a room disappeared and we heard voices. I don't remember that at all. So either that was a lie or I'm in the same boat as you and just didn't catch it.
That was not a lie. That really was a mission. Yeah, it was a sort of... It was a sort of spot the difference mission. The three of them would go into a room in the house with Alan.
Oh, I remember. Okay, now I remember it. Because, things would flicker. And it was fairly early on in the season, I feel like.
Yeah.
I don't know. It was... Okay, then no, I did not catch your lie this time.
My lie was very discreet. You mentioned a show called Outlast.
Mm-hmm.
And I said, I've heard of it, but I can't watch it here. I said it's not on Netflix UK. Yeah. That was a lie. It is available here. Oh. I haven't watched it, but you can watch it on Netflix. Yeah, I've seen it. I've seen the trailer.
Well, you did that very smoothly, and it was very believable because I know that I almost said, well, you can get a VPN,
Excellent. I feel I've redeemed myself a little bit. A little bit. David, thank you so much. As always, I really appreciate it. I know you have to take time out to watch the episode again and make notes, and then we record for a long time, so I'm really, really grateful. It's always great to have all of your expertise. I hope you've had a nice time talking about the finale.
Absolutely. It was fun. Thank you.
Fantastic. I will talk to you soon. Take care. Goodbye.
Bye.
Well, Trader listeners, we made it. The final episode of the Traitors UK is done. Although it's not quite over for the podcast season just yet, I still have a fantastic interview with someone really amazing for you, and I'm going to release that in a couple of weeks after I've returned from my long awaited holiday. If you've been listening to previous episodes, you'll already know who that interview's with because I've spoken about it so many times. So check in on the Trader on your podcast player in a couple of weeks' time to check that out. Before I go, I always ask guests about anything they want to promote or think people should check out. And I always tell you about the podcast social media. But to sort of almost end this season of the podcast, I thought I'd tell you about something else from me you could check out. I always begin the podcast by saying, "Hi, I'm Matthew and I'm a writer." And you may well be wondering, what does Matthew write? Well, because you're listening to this podcast, I'm guessing you like mystery, intrigue, and deception, and therefore might want to check out two of my novels. Turning the Hourglass is kind of like Doctor Who meets the Butterfly Effect, and imagines that ghosts aren't people from the past who died, they're people from the future who haven't been born yet. It's a time-travelling, character-led story centering on Dern, a historian from the future living with secrets and trying to illegally manipulate the past. Secondly, if you like Stranger Things, The Craft, or The Perks of Being a Wallflower, you could check out my spooky coming-of-age novel, The Stone in My Pocket. Just like The Traitors, it's set in Scotland, this time in a Scottish village in 1999, where 17-year-old Nathan can't talk to his parents, but believes he can talk to ghosts. The novel follows a teenage journey into mediumship, independence, and 90s pop culture. If you like the sound of those, check out the great reviews on Goodreads and Amazon, and you can buy copies via most online places where you would normally buy books. If you're in the UK, I recommend bookshop.org, Waterstones, or Blackwell's. Or you could even get in touch with me directly on Twitter and Instagram at Matthew J. Keeley, or on Facebook at Matthew Keeley Writer. One final plea: if books aren't really your thing, but you've enjoyed the podcast coverage of the Traitors UK, please take a little visit to my Ko-fi page. I research, write, record, edit, and deal with the distribution of this podcast completely by myself. I organise guests and operate the social media accounts. And I do it because I love the show so much and I'm enjoying everything about the podcast, except the amount of hours all this organisation takes. And I'm doing it all for free. In fact, it's costing me money. So if you've been listening in and you want me to keep it up, have a think about visiting ko-fi.com. That's ko-fi.com/Matthew Keeley, and that's spelled MATTHEWKEELEY, and putting in a wee donation. It's not a subscription or Patreon. It can just be a one-off, couple of pounds or dollars, whatever you think a cup of tea or coffee would cost. Thank you so much to Stephen and Amanda and Tracy, who've been really, really kind with their donations so far. I appreciate it so much. I'll put the link to my Ko-fi page in the episode notes on your podcast player. Thanks to everyone who has been listening to the podcast. The support has been fab. Remember, it's not quite over yet. A special bonus interview episode will be with you in a couple of weeks. I can't wait for you to hear it. Until then, Trader listeners, stay faithful.